Microsoft gave us numbers, Surface, and an Xbox port. Happy Friday, friends. It is Friday. It is the last day of January, which means we are officially 1/12 of the way through 2025, which is frightening in all respect, really. But at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, the days are getting slightly longer, and spring is on the horizon, which is my favorite time of the year. And so, hopefully January was good to all of you. Hopefully everybody had a wonderful week. There's a lot to talk about, so we are not going to waste any time to dive right in. So this week, in the tech news side, Microsoft had to drop its earnings, and the company will once again survive. They had revenue of 69.6. I always want to say 69. Nice. $0.6 billion in revenue, 24.1 billion in net income. Just a couple quick highlights. Their cloud revenue is now 40.9 billion, up 21%. Their AI business has surpassed an annual run rate of 13 billion, which is a lot of money, but it's still fractional compared to how much they've invested. I mean, they put $10 billion into OpenAI. So just, sort of keep things in check there. Windows and OEM device revenue increased 4%, which now includes Surface, so we don't get Surface revenue broken out at all. And Xbox content and services revenue increased 2%. However, it's worth noting that revenue was down for Xbox on the gaming side, 7% there. So just some things to keep in mind. Overall, the company is in great shape. They continue to churn out money like it's no problem. They have a factory generating all this stuff, and it's just, they can't be stopped at this point. 21 billion in net income. The fact that they can commit to spending $80 billion, I think it is this year, and building out new data centers, it's an unfathomable amount of money. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail here about the Xbox stuff. But first, there was news. And I say new in sort of quotation. It looks familiar, but it is new Surface hardware. So there's a new Surface Pro, and there's also a new Surface laptop for business. They are identical from an external perspective. I'm sure there's some sort of difference, but there's no form factor changes here. It's the Surface laptop. It's the Surface Pro that you know and hopefully love. And except that they now have Lunar Lake chips, and they are now $400 more than the ARM variant that was announced a while ago. Here's the thing. These things are fine. They're going to sell a certain volume or whatever, but they're never going to be, it's hard to let me just explain here. The naming of this stuff is why I'm getting caught up, is quite bad. So these things, that we'll use the Surface Pro as just an example, just the Surface Pro. This thing is officially called Surface Pro 11th Edition Series 2. Now, there already is a Surface Pro 11th Edition. It launched last year. And so, why didn't they just call it Surface Pro 2025? 11th Surface Pro 2025 for business. I don't know. It's whatever. They used to have things called the Surface Pro, and they realized how bad that was. So at least it has a specific name, but these things are different than the Surface Pro 11th Edition that was launched at mid 2024 or whatever. 10 months ago or something like that, whatever. Anyways, you can still get ARM variants and all that good stuff. Although people want to know, why would I pay $400 more for the Intel variant over the ARM variant? And the real simple answer here, and it's not always savory, is that enterprise just isn't ready for ARM. It's just not. I hit the wrong button there. It's just not. You can say they're great devices, which they are, but it takes time, because imagine you are a company of 40,000 people. I'm making up a scenario here. And you've had Intel devices for the last 30 years, and they've just worked, and your applications are all compatible, and they all do great, and there's relatively no issue. However, there's this new kid on the block. It's less expensive. It runs Windows on ARM, which is a different thing. You're not sure if everything runs. It seems like it runs, but are you going to buy that for 40,000 people and then all of a sudden realize a line of business application doesn't really work or something is off? It's just a risk that is not really worth taking, at least not yet. Eventually they will come around, and I'm sure there are business customers who are running the ARM variant. I'm not trying to knock the ARM variant, but there's $400 more. So just keep that in mind. Why are they doing that? Because quite frankly, Intel can get away with it. And so that's I think the real answer. Other things going on, Microsoft makes DeepSeek R1 available via Azure AI Foundry and GitHub. Obviously, DeepSeek, I don't want to say sunk the battleship, but I would say it disrupted and caused a little mayhem in the industry, where this company out of China did something some of the big boys who claim to have, a moat around this sort of stuff, and then comes a smaller, and I use smaller because we don't actually know how many NVIDIA GPUs. We don't really know the full story behind DeepSeek. Yes, they put things out into the universe that are open source, but you can mask that sort of thing. And so initially it seemed like, hey, this is like a massive disruption, this small little, but the more information we learn about them was like, hey, potentially they stole a bunch of stuff from OpenAI via the API. The thing is, you cannot put the LLM back in the bottle. And so this stuff is now out there, and it's just the natural sort of curve of technology, right? You get an idea, you get a thing in a market, and then the price does come down. However, I don't think people were expecting it to be this dramatic or this quickly, especially when you have companies like NVIDIA, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, every Meta, every company on the planet investing in GPUs, and all of a sudden, maybe that's not the right investment. So that was really the big shakeup, is not so much DeepSeek, is that maybe that you don't actually need all this hardware to do what is actually happening. Speaking of what's happening, something's happening to your start menu. And so Microsoft is now, this is on the insider stuff, this new, I think they call them sidecars, I can't remember, but we would all call them widgets, that attaches to the start menu and allows you to connect your device. Now, this is something through PhoneLink that has been around. It's not necessarily new. However, I think the iOS portion of it is. Now, I haven't tried this yet. I'm not expecting that iMessage will work. It probably works with RCS, and you can do things back and forth. If that's your thing, great. If you're a diehard iOS user and you really need PC integration, you're going to end up buying a Mac. I'm sure it works, but works and works well are two very different things at the end of the day. Speaking of, I don't know, at the end of the day, it could be the end of the day if you end up on the wrong website. I don't know, whatever. That was a terrible transition. Microsoft is previewing Edge scareware blockers. So if you're on a website and it's scary, no, really, it's more of the, I'm sure everybody's seen them at some point in their life. It's like, well, your computer's infected by 73 viruses. Click here to call Microsoft. And then, right, it's a complete scam. And so Edge is trying to use machine learning to detect what's on the page and then try to block that. And so, yeah. Other things happening, Microsoft is discontinuing Dev Home. If you were living in the Dev Home, you're going to be evicted here effectively. So some of the features will live on elsewhere, but Dev Home, I think it's about 2 years old or so. It just never really caught on. Microsoft kind of stopped investing in it, and yeah. And maybe it's related to this. Corey Sanders, who is a longtime Microsoft employee, has left the company. I believe he's now at CoreWeave or something like that. But he was running Microsoft's cloud for industry business. He was just sort of a staple of I don't want to say the old guard at Microsoft, but he was definitely fairly high up on that org chart. And to see him leave, along with, there's just been a lot of senior leadership sort of exodus over the past few months. And so this is just another one going down that path. So, there you go. All right. On to the gaming news, because there is a lot. So the promised DLC for Age of Empires 3 is no more. Not Age of Empires 2 or anything else, but the DLC for Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition has been canceled. No more updates are planned, which effectively means the game's probably dead. Now, that realistically doesn't mean you can't go play the game, but Microsoft is looking at it from can we make money if we build this DLC? And the answer is no. And we'll talk about Xbox earnings here specifically, and that will become more obvious. Ubisoft is laying off another 185 employees. They have shut down another support studio. Ubisoft continues to be on the backside of some financial stress here, and clearly making some pretty drastic moves to try to shore up their balance sheet. And this is a long list of layoffs in the gaming sector, and they're, even just at Ubisoft, it's a long list. And so other things that are happening here, this is quite possibly could have been the best headline ever. It's Forza crosses the event horizon and lands on the PlayStation 5. So if you don't know what an event horizon is, it is around a black hole, and once you cross that event horizon, there's no going back. So it means you're definitely getting sucked into the black hole. And so that was just, I like space, Forza Horizon event, right? Because Xbox going over to PlayStation, right? There's no going back. Get it? Haha. Yes, it is a pun or something. It may not even be a pun. But this is probably the first title other than Indiana Jones, which was announced last year, that will get announced this year, and probably many more coming from Team Xbox over to PlayStation as they try to figure out ways to make more money with the content that they have in this competitive and challenging gaming market that they find themselves competing in. Something a little bit more interesting as well is MLB The Show is not going to be dropping into Game Pass or PlayStation Plus. And so I think this is the first time in a few years. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if maybe it drops in, I don't know, in the middle of the summer, but leading up to the baseball season, maybe they're trying to, maybe they think more people will buy it leading up to the season, which kicks off here, not in a few weeks, but a couple months here. And so there you go. Ellie De La Cruz, who is a Cincinnati Red there in the middle, making the cover. This is like might be the first time that ever a Cincinnati Red is on the cover. And one of the reasons why I highlighted that title too as well. Now let's dive here into the Xbox numbers just a bit. I already have a video on my YouTube channel that dives excruciatingly deep on some of these numbers. If you want more, go find that video. However, here's the highlights, if you want to call them that. Revenue was down 7%. Game Pass services were up, or Xbox services were up 2%. Hardware was down 29%. And Phil Spencer keeps reiterating that hardware is critical to what they do. The reason why he keeps saying that is because these hardware numbers keep declining rather significantly, and Xbox is not shipping any new hardware, and which is why that continues to happen. However, their Game Pass services is up, so like Xbox is finding itself like in this band of revenue that is hard to escape, because they have revenue from last year, right? These are year-over-year numbers that are declining. Like if you sold one Xbox Series X at $499 roughly, and then you are trying to make up for that in what? $20 a month per Game Pass subscriber, it means you got to sell 25 new subscriptions to just to be $0 out on last year's performance. And that's a challenge. Now, granted, it's a little bit better on the Series S side. However, that's a big challenge, and that's what I mean. Like, you have these big chunky revenue declines on the hardware side, and subscriptions are trying to grow up and grow through that. And so that becomes challenging. So the fact that Game Pass or game services, however, were only up 2% means that the growth may not have been as much as expected and or hoped for putting Call of Duty in there. It doesn't seem that Xbox is like just throwing in the towel and giving up. Phil Spencer says they will make more hardware, but that explains why all these titles are going over to PlayStation, is because they're trying to break through those barriers, but they're just struggling to do it. And so how do you break through when you can't, I shouldn't say can't, but don't want to build new hardware of the same stuff, meaning Xbox Series X Pro? You got to sell more games on different platforms. And so they look at their back catalog and say, look, we can port this over to PlayStation and we'll sell X number of units. It should be profitable for us. And so there you go. There you go. It's interesting times for Xbox. I've said that a bunch as I clicked the wrong button there yet again. People on the audio side, we are zoomed in very close on my head, but it's fine. It is fine. So we are going to dive into the questions here because there are a lot of them, my friends. There's a lot. So let's refresh the thread. And for anybody who's wondering why I keep clicking the wrong buttons, like I use a Stream Deck. And so I completely redid it. Other people who watch me on another podcast will know that I've now, if you notice, there's fancy transitions to go between these things. And so I kind of had to like revamp how I do things. And so I moved all the buttons around, and it'll take me a couple times here to get used to the new flow, if you will. So anyways, the first question comes from Rafik. He says, last time you said that you're against Microsoft going after TikTok, but then I found out the app makes around $20 billion a year in revenue. Wouldn't that be a no-brainer move, especially if Microsoft leaves it as is and doesn't touch it? So there used to be this app called Skype, and Skype used to make a bunch of money, and now nobody uses Skype. And so here's the thing. $20 billion a year in revenue is great, but how much of that is net income, right? How much is it costing them to run TikTok? Because that's roughly, there's 4 quarters in a year, so that means they're making $5 billion in revenue per quarter. Are they profitable, though? That is a question I don't know. I do not know TikTok numbers, their financials like I do Microsoft, so I don't know. But even if they are profitable, Microsoft, how much are they going to spend to go get TikTok? Are they going to spend $60 billion? Because clearly they're not going to do it all. And it's a real complicated purchase because it's not TikTok in whole, it's only TikTok US, and I don't even believe that includes the algorithm, which is one of the most lucrative things that TikTok has, is right, that feed that gives you the things you're looking for, that are being generated or dynamically done every time you swipe. And so for Microsoft, it's just like, guys, I know you desperately want these consumer connections. You have Xbox, you had Surface, there's LinkedIn out there, that LinkedIn is more business. It's like, stick with what you're good at. And I don't know, maybe they want to put them all on Azure and then it's some big AI feed. maybe. I still don't think it makes much sense for Microsoft's overall business. But you know what? That's not my decision to make. So Simon says, people have managed to get AMD GPUs working on a Raspberry 5 Pi, wow, to play AAA games, Doom, Halo, etc., using Steam to do a regular install. Do you think this will influence Xbox and PlayStation to move to an ARM CPU for the next version of consoles? No. If they move to ARM, it's not because somebody hooked up an AMD GPU to a Raspberry Pi and got it done. Realistically, the reason we know this is because they've already made this decision, right? There's rumors that Xbox is launching stuff as early as 2026, so that would be next year. I think PlayStation's rumored 2027. These guys are already deep into development, and so if they're going to ARM, that decision has already been made for them. Realistically, I continue to think that if Microsoft is going to go ARM, the console will be a traditional AMD CPU, x86 or whatever, and GPU. It would be when they do a handheld device. That would make the most decision, at least for Xbox. We will see. I'm not saying they wouldn't. I keep saying I don't know if they would for the traditional console, because that's a pretty big risk. They're already in a risky scenario. They just need to feed the machine. And so I guess it's really just going to depend on if they can get their hypervisor to run on the ARM chips the way that they want it to, because that would, in theory, be a big win, at least for the long run, and could maybe help get NVIDIA and Qualcomm to pay for the development rather than just going the traditional route. Because one of the things we all know that's lacking on ARM devices, Windows on ARM specifically, is gaming. And so Microsoft needs to get that figured out. So that would be a thing. I don't know. We should hopefully know, soon in quotations about what Xbox is doing. I mean, last time they announced it, what was that? The Game Show Awards in December for the Xbox Series X, and then it launched next November. So, end of the year, maybe we'll learn what's happening for the following year. We're not quite sure. We are not quite sure. Sydney 2K says, hello, Brad. With the news that Forza Horizon 5 is going to PlayStation, how would you personally launch Halo on Sony's console? Via a blog post or social media, or make it a media event or something else? I don't think Microsoft is going to make a big media event out of this, because it's, even though they're doing it to make money and they're doing all that stuff, here's the thing. Microsoft is really good at marketing to Microsoft gaming. I can give you another example. So I work at Stardock. We make and ship Windows apps. We could make Mac apps, but we aren't good. We don't have the capacity to market to Mac users. And so Microsoft has the ability to market to Xbox gamers very well and PC gamers, but they don't have a great ability to market to PlayStation gamers. And so I don't think they're going to put on a huge event for something like this. I mean, look at how they did Indiana Jones. I think it'll be more of a, hey, we are doing this, but I would not expect some sort of dedicated event where Xbox gets up on stage and talks about all the games that they're porting to the other platform. Rafiq with a bunch of questions this week. My man, bring it on in. Let's see here. So he says, do you think that Microsoft will make a big acquisition in the next 4 years under the new FTC and CMA? No, I do not. I think that they will try to stay out of the limelight, given their investments in OpenAI. And while the new administration is a bit more favorable in the business sense, it does seem that they're, with the little exception of big tech. And so that seems one area where they may not be as favorable. His next question is, if multi-platform strategy is really working for Xbox and increases the profits, why don't they reveal the profit numbers to prove the diehard fans it's working? Because they don't have to. They don't win anything. If the narrative comes out, Microsoft makes more money on PlayStation than Xbox, that is not going to go over well. And so when they do launch new hardware, why would anybody buy it if they're saying, look how great we do on PlayStation? Now, here's the interesting thing to that conversation. From a margin perspective, they probably make more money. Well, that's hard to say. I was going to say selling directly to PlayStation because they have no hardware tied up in that. So, they don't make as much money on their own hardware because they build the hardware, which the margins on hardware just are not as good. So that's sort of a thing. And his last question, he says, Microsoft revealed they will push for more profitability. So in the future, when it comes to hardware, do you think they will produce fewer Xboxes and make them more expensive, just like Surface? And is it going to work? No, I think they're going to try to expand who can build an Xbox. That's what I personally think, is that they will take the Xbox OS and make a certified for Xbox device. So Dell could build an Xbox, a gaming PC that is a certain specification that can then run that hypervisor and boot into Xbox mode, almost like Media Center, if you will, sort of style experience. And then once you're in that experience, then it's the classic Xbox experience. Because it's locked hardware, it's real easy to configure and ship. And so that's how I think they diversify their hardware expenditures and get more Xbox devices out into the, quote unquote Xbox devices out into the world, rather than saying, like, if you want an Xbox, you have to go buy the plastic box at Best Buy. Like, that is how I think they are going to do this. And Greg Edwards dropping a couple questions in as well. He says, I have an Xbox Series S that just decided for whatever reason to stop sending HDMI outputs to its TV. No settings have changed to my knowledge. Tried replacing the cable, plugging it into a different HDMI port, reset the TV. I even reset the Xbox to no avail. I have a second Series S console on another TV in the house, and I was able to just swap it outright, so that he's basically doing basic triage. If you're not familiar with how that works, that is what you do. He says, same HDMI cables attached to the TVs, and they both work fine when swapped for the moment. Here is my question. Do you know whether there's a troubleshooting process for this? Meaning you can boot into an Xbox safe mode with minimal... No, I know where you're headed with this. You want the safe mode that Windows has, and other video settings turned off to fix these AV output problems. Could it be the HDMI port has gone bad on the console? It seems like I see a lot of used Xbox consoles on Facebook with bad HDMI port. What is Microsoft doing for hardware quality assurance? So here's where you can have fun, and you can be like me, and you can just say, my Xbox is dead. This doesn't work. It doesn't make sense to fix that, because you're going to try to take that to the Ubrake iFix, that the partnership they just announced. And hey, it's not going to be cheap to get that port fixed. Here's what I would do if I were you. I would turn this into a fun project. I would go get a multimeter. I would crack that baby open, and I would try to see if you can figure out what's going on with the port. Make a project out of this. Like, this is my kind of jam. If you ever like hear me or follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky or wherever, I do this all the time. That's how I fixed my Xbox Series X. I cracked it all the way open, figured out a bad power supply, and then put a new one in, and it works. And so that is what I would do. I would crack this baby open, first crack it open, and then just see if there's like a missing soldering joint. Like, that would be my initial expectation, is that somehow, some way, that a soldering joint or pin just became disconnected, or dust got in there and it's shorting that out. And so crack that baby open, see if you can figure it out, and then just try to learn something from it. I don't know. Like, I get it. By the way, I get it. These things are not cheap. $200 on sale if you're lucky. More like $249 on a decent day, or $299 if you just pay sticker these days. I get it. But lemons are in front of you, so you're gonna have to make some lemonade. But I don't know without being there next to you, try to figure out how to help you fix this. You've done all of the logical things that I would do, and you've just determined that it is the port or something inside the Xbox. If the Xbox turns on, but you're just getting no video, which is what it sounds like something is loose in there, and maybe if you get lucky, you'll be able to figure it out. And Mr. PKI ending it this week with a double dose of questions. He says, I finally finished Indiana Jones, and I have to admit, I was a little disappointed of the game ending. It seems a little rushed and not high quality compared to the rest of the game. What do you think? I have not finished it yet. I committed to finishing this game, but I have not finished it yet. The problem is I'm going to run into Doom, and I've run out of my time to play Indiana Jones is dwindling. But yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious what other commenters think about the ending specifically. And his second question is, how about a recap of Xbox earnings and Game Pass? Is it really hard to discern if Xbox is doing well, and has Activision Blizzard acquisition been a success in growing the business? Or is it all the growth in Game Pass occurring in PCs? Now, the reason why he says PCs is because during the earnings call, Satya Nadella said that, hey, there was a 30% growth in Xbox Game Pass on PC. However, I don't think I'm going on a limb here to say this, that the PC side is fractional. It always has seemed much smaller compared to the traditional console. And so there was growth there of 30%, but 30% of what? The problem with Microsoft, especially on the Xbox side, is that they're so darn big, they don't have to tell us. They don't have to tell us. They can just sort of smudge these numbers along because they made nearly $70 billion, and Xbox is not close enough to becoming material to where they have to share this information. And so that's the reality of Game Pass is, yes, it's big for like you and I, but inside the juggernaut that is Microsoft, it's relatively small. And it's not necessarily a write-off. That is not the way I would phrase this. It's just that they don't have to break it out, which is really frustrating, unfortunately. And so the question becomes, has the Activision Blizzard acquisition been a success in growing the Xbox business? I don't think we can say it has been yet. It hasn't hurt it hurt the business and the amount of cash that had to walk out the door for this. However, I don't think we can say that it has helped the business. Right now, again, as I noted, they're stuck like in this sort of lane of revenue that they can't seem to break out of. And even putting Call of Duty Black Ops in there, we don't see the numbers yet. However, because Microsoft doesn't share the numbers, we got to remember it's tough because they traded $70 game title purchases for $20 a month. So it takes them several months to get ahead of what they would have done if somebody just outright bought the game. So there you go. There you go with fumble fingers over here on this side of the camera, pressing the wrong buttons a couple times and whatever. That's the magic of post. You can edit things together. I will get it together because I like these transitions. Not necessarily that one, but like these in between and then like going back to big and going to there. Look at that. That's smooth operator. So anyways, that's what I mean. Edward, if you're Edward, oh God, Greg Edwards. If you're listening, that's what I mean. Like I couldn't figure something out or I wanted something better. So you just got to go tinker around till you figure it out. And hopefully you can figure out your hardware problem. I offered you the advice that I would do is just start tinkering. So anyways, tinker away, my good friends. And as always, make sure to keep it subscribed here because only BS on this podcast is me.